Yeah, well, yes. Hello, South Australia and the world over. We are right here in Radio Adelaide FM 1.5. The program is called Afro World. This is the program which gives you news, culture, and of course, music from the continent of Africa. But today and tonight, should I say, I'm having a very important conversation to Africans in Australia, to Africans in diaspora. I'm going to be in conversation with Dr. Joseph Masika. Dr. Joseph Masika is the first African to be voted or to be elected into an official position in Australia. He was voted as a councillor in the seat of Marion. So he's the first African to be voted. There are some who have been politicians before, but they were not voted. They went through whichever means they went through, but we're talking about someone who was voted officially and won an election. This is the man that I'm talking to. This is the man who is also credited with a lot of work in the African communities in South Australia and in Africa, in Australia, and also is part of a lot of activities, some to do with even the African Union. But Mr. Joseph Masika, Dr. Joseph Masika, can you introduce yourself?
Thanks so much, Jaison, for your kind introduction. And as you said, my name is Dr. Joseph Masika. I live in South Australia, in Adelaide. And I'm so proud and be happy to be part of this evening conversation. And I look forward to share a conversation with everyone who is online and who is listening. And I say to everyone who is listening, thanks for supporting this radio and for supporting Jason. And it has been a very tough year, but we've managed to go through, and we're looking forward to finish this year, 2020, and start a new one, 2021, which probably is more brighter and more rewarding as it seems to be. So if I don't get a chance to any other time, I would like to wish everyone Merry Christmas and be safe and enjoy this festival season with your family and friends.
And the purpose of this conversation, Dr. Masika, is to document the history of Africans in Australia correctly, to document the history of Africans in Adelaide or South Australia correctly. Let me say, I haven't come across any publication which Africans spoke about themselves in South Australia. And this is going to be the first of many publications which will be coming to ensure that we tell our story correctly as Africans to one another. We wouldn't worry much about the outside world, as long as we know ourselves. Now, Dr. Joseph Masika, I want to get straight into the issues. Can you tell the world how the African community emerged, the history of the African community in South Australia, and your involvement?
Thanks, Nelson. You know, the history of African involvement in South Australia is very rich and long. And as far as I can remember, I can take everyone back to 1996. And there are people, very few of us, they came up before that time. And in South Australia, you know, there are very few. You could have counted it less than a dozen. The number of Africans who were here. And eventually we started seeing the number, before the number started rising. I remember 1996, there was a meeting which was convened by Migrant Resource Centre of South Australia at the Coughlin Street. And this meeting was to meet up with Minister Philip Ruddock, when he was the Minister for Immigration. And when he came to that meeting, and I know there are some other people who were there, like Benny Yenge, who was the first of African to be here, David Malinda, and were there. And we said to Philip Ruddock that there are so many people in refugee camps, and they look up for safe haven where they can be resettled, but they don't have anywhere to go, and the Australian is not taking up refugees from Africa. And he promised, he said, look, he is very happy to engage and to take up the people from refugee camps in Africa. And he did that. And from that time, we started seeing number of people coming from Ethiopia, and also coming from Southern Sudan and Eritrea, and yes, by that time, those are the few people coming. But those who were here before, they are skilled migrants. But in around 1998, the number was growing up significantly from what the Honorable Philip Radok promised. And from there, we say, look, we are here as Africans. What can we do to make sure that our voice is heard and we have good representation of our community to the community government, to the state government, and also to the local government, and also to have a body which can speak on or advocate for on behalf of African community. And that's why that year, 1998, we went to Milo camp, where we were more than 200 by that time Africans, including Ben Yengi, who is now back in Southern Sudan, and we had the late Philip Tonguin, and then Kala Tonguin also was there. And we have so many people who attend up to the meeting, and we work out that we need an organization to represent us. But if we make one step back, there was the two organizations which were there, but most of the Africans, they didn't connect with the two organizations. One of the organizations was the African Heritage Association of South Australia, and the other one was ACOSA. So these two organizations, they were there before, but most of us who came,
Dr. Joseph,
yeah.
Dr. Joseph, can I take you back a bit?
Yeah.
When was ACOSA formed? Who formed it? When was AHASA formed? Who formed it?
Yes, I did it. I think in the early 90s, ACOSA was formed. But I don't know what happened, but it appeared there was a disagreement between those who were here, a few Africans. And then AHASA was born out of that disagreement, and they became organization representing the African heritage of in South Australia. There's AHASA, is the African Heritage Association of South Australia. That was the meaning of it. And those organizations continue to be there until when...
Let me come back again with that one.
Yes.
Let me come back there. We want to clarify that one. So, when did you come to Australia?
I arrived up here in 1996.
Or to South Australia?
1996.
1996. So,
yes.
When you arrived in 1996, ACOSA had been formed.
And the AHASA has already been formed.
And ACOSA ACOSA and
yes.
AHASA had been formed. Were
yes.
they sold to you as a new arrival? That we have this organization is going to help you like this as a new arrival. Those two organizations, did their leaders, were they sold to you? Did they even tell you why they were two African organizations at that time? You were new, 1996. They were there. Did they tell you as a new arrival why they had two organizations and how they would be useful to you as a new arrival?
Yeah, you see, what happened if those organizations could have been there to support the new arrivals, things could have been different. But when I arrived up here, I didn't know the existence of those two. But as I was starting my journey in South Australia, I came across of AHASA. And that's why I knew the existence of AHASA. And when I tried to inquire, and they said there's ACOSA, but ACOSA was only engaging to try to educate schools about the African culture. So it wasn't between the African community members and the organization, but it was organization and engaging with the service providers. So I didn't know much about that one day. And so my first meeting to meet up African leader or an organization of African leader was meeting up for AHASA. But eventually,
who was the leader of AHASA at that time?
Ben Yengi was the leader of AHASA by that time. And there was also Francis Alekwache. You know, he was a lawyer, Francis Alekwache. By that time, they were much involved with the AHASA.
And what services was AHASA offering? You told us ACOSA was engaging schools, teaching them African culture, and not much to do with community. What was AHASA offering?
The AHASA also was making advocacy at a low level. It is the organization which they were formed without anticipation that there will be a number of Africans will grow very fast, and they also align their objectives with the incoming new communities coming on board. So when they were created, they said, okay, those few over here, they say, let's go and teach the department, the government entities about the African culture. They can understand the African language, African food, African this and that. But that has nothing to do with the community itself. And then the AHASA was also talking about the African heritage at a broad picture, but it has nothing to engage with the community itself. But what happened when we came to find out
so did you join any one of them?
Yes, I joined up. I tried to join the two, but I succeeded to join one. One organization I tried to join sent up application, but it never came back. That's
which one did you manage to join?
No, probably I would rather not to take it there. I better leave it now for the time being. Probably I'll mention in the end. But what I will say...
So you tried to send an application to ACOSA. All right. Yes, you sent an application to join ACOSA. You didn't.
Yes, I didn't succeed to that one. We can say it in short. But when we tried AHASA,
fine.
It was a little bit, because it was a heritage, talking about heritage. And from that time, being involved with the AHASA, but we decided let's put up management, and also start bringing up the Africans back together. And then what we did with the AHASA, we say we want to have every weekend have an African gathering where we can have music, we can have food, we can have that. But there was no any other big picture part of that. So we used to meet up on Coughlin Street every fortnight, where we'll have music, DJ music, and also sit down and enjoy conversation and meet other African people. That's what it is. And it became very successful. But it wasn't a true organization representing the voice of Africans or representing the community at large. And that's why when the number increased, AHASA found it wasn't the appropriate organization to carry the community forward to in terms of advocates, self-supervision, and everything. So from there, the Africans themselves, the new ones came, they said, look, what's happening here? And you can't say AHASA was representing Africans, because it was there to promote heritage, but not representing African. It was promoting heritage. So from there, the Africans ourselves, we say, look, we needed to go weekend and think what did we want to do. And that weekend, we went to Milo, the police camp, which is the Adelaide Hills, for weekend. Saturday, Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night, and then the whole discussion until Sunday, 4 o'clock, we finish up with the gathering, where we were close to 200 people, where we had a camp for 2 days. 2 nights, 3 days. So, and from there, we came back with the formation of African Community Council of South Australia. That's where 2001, the council was born. And the council objective was to engage the community and represent the community, advocate for the community, and they also provide the services to the community. That's how it is formed. So that's why I say, look, until now, the African Community Council of South Australia is still there. And I look forward to take other questions to see which way forward from there. Back to you, studio, Jaison.
Okay, so was AHASA disbanded when ACCSA was formed?
Yes, what happened because ACSA, when this African Community Council, when it was formed, embraced the objective which was being
All right. Yeah, what I wanted is because some of us, some of the new arrivals, would not know whether AHASA is still operational or it stopped operating, or is it AHASA which transitioned into ACCSA, or AHASA continued doing its job of marketing the heritage of Africa, and then we had representation, the voice now coming as ACCSA.
No, what happened when the African Community Council of South Australia was born? So
Hello.
when it was born, so ACSA was incorporated into the new organization. So because what happened, the African Community Council.
Okay, Dr. Joseph Masika. Dr. Joseph.
Yes.
I think there was an interruption on the network. I'm not sure on your side. It looks like there was some dragging when you were speaking. So thank you very much. You have taken us into the formation of ACCSA, and you have managed to clarify that there have been three organizations with different objectives. And we came to ACCSA, which had the objectives of engaging the community. Now, can you take it up from there? What were the challenges that you formed in getting ACCSA up and running, and what were the highlights of that journey?
Yeah, you see what happened when the ACCSA was formed in 2001, AHASA, which is the African Heritage Association, stopped to exist. So because most of what they are promoting heritage was absorbed by the African Community Council of South Australia. That's why we did things like a festival. Festival was to promote African culture and the African foods and everything, which was being done by AHASA. So it stays ACCSA and the ACOSA. ACOSA never took part in the creation of the African peak body. And also the ACOSA decided to go on its way. And also the way these two organizations are formed are different. African Community Council of South Australia, they've got a membership. So, and they also, all these African countries, they decided to take the membership. And that's why we used to have, on the board, used to be by the country of representation. But ACOSA is different. ACOSA, there's no membership. That's they say they represent anyone who is black outside. So long you are African, they say you don't need to be a member. They represent you, even if you don't know that they exist, their existence, but they assume you know and they represent you, which is different. So so ACCSA, the African Community Council, took up very well because it managed to engage with the both levels of the government, local government, state government, and the federal government, and is managed to pitch to convince the government to continue supporting the flow of Africans from refugee camps to back to Australia, and also those skilled migrants to come. And that's why you see the number of population of African increased rapidly between 2001 to 2007. And also you see the Commonwealth government and British government, they came to support the African Community Council because African Community Council became service provider, because they are providing advocates, and also they are providing services to the community, and also bring up resilience and support to the community members. So it continued to enjoy that privilege, and it was truly a very representative and working there. So the challenge
Dr. Masika, can you come on the services that ACCSA was providing or provides or is meant to provide to the communities, so that everyone can get to know?
Yes, ACCSA was providing up settlement services. That after the first initial 6 months with the peak body which was settling refugees in South Australia, ACCSA was providing services for 5 years for the same person for 5 years. So if anyone, after exiting the intensive settlement services, they will be taken over, those of African background, and being provided services for 5 years. So it involved, with the children, child care, enrolling people to schools, kids to schools, supporting people with employment, providing up recreation programs for the families, for the young people, for women, also providing up those sewing classes, including table tennis, sports recreation. So they were funded to provide everything. And if you can remember, we used to have African house at the Prospect, which used to be gym and also community center, and everyone used to be there. So we used to have those kind of activities, including physical activities. That's why we have those machines and the computer for those home class people to do, the young people to do homework. They come back there. If they can't have a computer at home, they don't have a computer, they come to the center, they can access with the more than 20 computers. And the other things which we did, we started the African microchips, that center, that it was training up people, young people, about how to code the microchips. And also they can sell them to China, they can sell them to the companies which are making fridge, television, and everything. And it was very successful project. And including up the Commonwealth government, the parliamentary secretary, and also the state director and the governor, they came to see how young people were engaged into designing coding microchips. Those who are using up in motor vehicles, in televisions, in the fridges, everything where they need computerized kind of sockets. So, and also we provided aged care services. So those people who are fairly aged and they need somebody to help them in their homes, cleaning, shopping, take them to church, take them to the mosque, take them to visit their friends, or have somebody to come and talk to them. That ACC was providing that service for the last, since 2012. But so since the ACC was formed, it was there. We used to run the African festivals. I remember everyone will know how it used to be big. We started with the Parklands in Southern Parkland, and then went to Victoria Square. We were Handmarch Square. And also we used to run the African Cup of Nations, where families they come. So it was depending the season. When it is African Cup of season, October, African Cup of Nation, come September, we have African Festival, and then we have other things. And also ACC was empowering the communities, other smaller communities, specific communities, because they used to write up a grant application and it disperses money to the smaller communities. It can be 1,000, it can be 500, for the communities to be able to do up what they want to do. So it was a bigger things which was supporting there. And we can come and do that, but for the time being, what's happening, project has been reduced a little bit. And also, we believe that we can go back where we used to be. And the major issue which we are facing is having two organizations competing, because we have ACOSA, we have AHASA. AHASA was known to be a true representative, but we have ACOSA on the side. And ACOSA was saying, we are representing Africans. And if in the front of the eyes of the bureaucrats or the politician, it wasn't good. Because if we can't speak with one voice, we are divided. So the government intended to ignore that until we are united, we can come back and listen what we are saying. So that was the challenge. And the other challenge, which was there, is how the African Community Council was viewed. Because when we see the number of skilled migrants increasing, but it's not that big compared to the refugees or communities of refugee background. So the skilled migrant, they thought African Community Council of South Australia is a picky body for the refugees, but it wasn't.
Yeah,
it was for everyone. So that also was a challenge. So it required some education and the awareness to people to understand that this is not only for refugees; it's for the Africans. It's not for one section of the community.
And what's the link between ACC and MRC, Migrant Resource Center?
And there's been a very good, long-standing relationship between the African Community Council of South Australia and the Migrant Resource Center for two reasons. Reason number one, that our Migrant Resource Center has been a peak body settling all refugees coming to South Australia. Whether you're coming from Middle East, you're coming from Europe, you're coming from Africa, or you're coming from Latin America. In South Australia, MRC was the Migrant Resource Center was a preferred body by the Commonwealth government to provide that service on behalf of the Commonwealth government. So any African who was settled under a refugee program stayed with the MRC for 1 year. So, and the MRC, it could see that where this African will go after 12 months. That's why MRC was very close with the Africans, because that's the body was providing the settlement services, to say, look, you need to create your own organization which will help you to continue with your own journey. And that's why for me, I was a skilled migrant, but we came to know more of the services available in South Australia through MRC, through Migrant Resource Center. And this Migrant Resource Center organized the camp in Milo to come there and they say, but they didn't say to the African what you want to do, what you need to do. They said they book up the place, they organize logistic buses to carry people there. But they say, you Africans, you are mature enough to decide what you want to do. So that's why we look up there, we say, okay, we are here, what do we need? What do we need for our children? What do we need our grandchildren? How can we let the government know our issues, our interests, our aspirations? That's why we came with us as ACCSA. But when we come with ACCSA, there was no funding. So we needed a platform which will support us for while we are establishing ourselves. It's the same as when the baby is born. The baby can't walk and feed himself, can't go anywhere. It depends on the parents for protection, for feeding, and for support until the child is starting maturing and take their own steps. And that's what's the relationship. And that relationship still exists. It's of mutual benefits. And that's why I said, look, it has been that. But those people, other people who, for their other reasons, they didn't want to see migrant resource that time, they decided to walk away. But that's fine. But if we talk to the Africans who are very successful today, they will find out their journey also was connected with the Migrant Resource Center, to that one there, including the ACC.
And Dr. Masika, whenever something is going on very well or very badly, even very well, you hear lots of talk around. I understand you as a leader of ACC, you would have heard lots of talk around, like some people say Africans are divided. there is ACOSA, there is ACCSA. It's because the issues had not been explained. Like you said, the scope of operation were different. The scopes were different. That's why we had to have bodies in existence. But when we go to government, sometimes government will not quickly understand whether you are doing the same thing or you are competing, which is what I managed to pick from you. So what do you think there were misconceptions that would have come that needed clarification to the people?
You see, firstly, there are two things which I needed to put it straightforward. When ACC started there, we see, and because the Africans were new, we see a lot of coming together. There was that need of coming together. And we went this journey, but as we continue going along, we could see some groups being established within the community. You can find that they started dividing. We saw Ethiopian becomes two groups instead of one, as it started before. In 2001, they came to ACC as one group. And then as they go, they start to see the government giving money and everything, and they split, they become two. Eritreans, they split, they become two. And then we went to see the other groups, also they're splitting three. And so they started moving in different direction. And we started to see people looking that, instead of looking themselves as a country, they started seeing themselves through their ethnic groups. And they started going separate ways. And that was a challenge for the ACC. Because if you are a chair of ACC, we said we needed to have a country representation on board. We are not picking up ethno-specific group, because we were mindful, like Sudanese, they had 22 associations within Southern Sudanese. But if we will bring those all to the African Community Council, you can't manage them. So we say, look, they can divide as many as they want, but we'll have country representation. And the other group, when they were fighting, each one will say, I'm the one representing the country. And first we say, no, we don't see that way. So they walk away, they say, we don't want to be with the ACC. You see, those were the challenges. Because if the group would have stayed as a country, we could have seen less fractions, and we could see ACC being very actively being supported. But the support was becoming an issue, not because the ACC is wrong or it's not good, it's because of the division which was happening within the community itself. And when they go back to asking for the money, and they can't get the money, ACC is being asked which is the true group representing this country. And if we say this is the true group, it becomes an issue. I know even Zimbabwean community, you know how many groups are there. So that was the typical wave which came up in 2013, 10, 13 to 14, 15. We saw that madness coming on board. But the ACC is still there.
It's still the case right now. Does ACC have a resolution or policies in place which can, make people at least to respect the constitution that is laid down? Or it's just they can fix themselves?
No, ACC has got the constitution of two things. Number one, to support the communities to live in harmony, because that is one of the objectives of ACC. And also, if there are some problems, to come to ACC and find up a resolution through brotherhood, talking and sort of things. But the ACC has no power to interfere whatever the community is doing. It's the same as the African Union structure. They can't interfere what is happening in a country, in a member state. But they can talk, they say, look, and encourage the parties to try to resolve the issues amicably and in a passive way. But the country, they can ignore, one side can ignore, and they decided to go the opposite. And that's why I'll give you an example, typical example. When I was a president, Maboko was the vice chair. And he was elected the vice chair. But when the Sudanese, they take up leadership, another one comes, he says he don't want to see Maboko being vice chair. He wants to see him being sacked. And I said, look, the constitution doesn't work that way. And for him, he said, look, if that's the case, we are going to move away from ACC. You see,
Yeah.
so it was ignorant upon that. But for us, we are taking up a step, not aggressive step, but it was educative step to say, look, this is the structure. And that's why we can't act the way they want us to act. And because we're not acting the way they are pushing us to act, they believe that we are not representing them. Sorry. So we're not representing them, so they move away. So those are the challenges which ACC was facing. But we find now, because there's no money from the government going back to the community started coming back on a national level, being country representative. And once they're coming back country representative, I see they've gone back to African Community Council. They started coming back. And I know they had the election 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And I was looking up the number of new board which has come back to African Community Council. You'll see people are there, they're coming from different countries. They've elected the chair, Dennis Yengi is from Southern Sudan. And then they've got the treasurer from another country. And then we have one other, George Fumba from Liberia. And then we have the young man from Congo. And then we have another, the treasurer, also from Apio, John Apio from Uganda. So you can see now the community is being formed. And also it is starting moving away, bringing that awareness to the people. ACC is not there for refugees group. It is a voice for the African. It needs to be supported by all Africans. And that's what I will encourage the African people.
Continue.
I would say, look, I will encourage the African people that you don't move away and establish another body while the another body already exists. So we have, you needed to, anyone ask to be given the Constitution of African Community Council of South Australia, and you see their objectives. They are very broad, but it covers including cultural, settlement, advocacy, and also supporting everyone within the community of African background. So it's to see how, as individual, be you and everyone who is listening as individual, we can support this body, and also see our communities, how can we support that one? Because what is lacking, and it's lacking, I work for the government and I see what's happening in the government, the Africa needs to have a very good, very big voice. We have the numbers, but we don't use those numbers correctly. So we needed to go back behind the African Community Council of South Australia and say, look, we are here. And even if there are things you don't want within the council, it's better you be part of it and you correct it from within, rather than staying aside and throw up criticism without any contribution to move it forward. So that's why my engagement is to be within and make sure that your voice counts and your voice heard, and you you be part of the change rather than being stay outside and criticize without taking any action.
Dr. Masika, we were supposed to cover a lot of issues, different topics. I think I'll have to engage you again. We have got, but I want you just to finalize tonight's engagement with something that is bothering the world, which you can just put in 3 minutes, if I can say. When COVID-19 started, the Tanzanian president, where you come from yourself, Mr. John Pombe Magufuli, he said COVID, he expressed ignorance to COVID to the extent that there was nothing happening in Tanzania as far as COVID and all these other issues that was going on around the world is concerned. Tanzania did not take the steps that the world was taking. Can you tell us what is happening in Tanzania in as far as COVID is concerned? Does Tanzania have COVID, or Are people dying of COVID, or there is no COVID at all in Tanzania?
No, I'll speak it into two levels. Number one, I will touch it is around the COVID-19 itself. When the COVID-19 started, we saw what was happening in Italy, in Spain, and we saw what was happening in UK, and eventually what was happening in America. Australia, we were lucky. Things didn't happen the way it is happening. We saw what happened in Europe. So in Tanzania, when in Africa, generally, the COVID didn't hit the way it did in Europe and in America. It didn't. Because when we knew that there's a pandemic coming, I had a lot of worries because I know the healthcare system in Africa, that it wasn't going to cope, even anyhow, with the spread of this virus COVID-19. It was going to wipe my imagination that Africa was going to lose a lot of people. Remember, our population is 1.3 billion population. So I was expecting a lot of millions of people, life was going to be lost. But things turned up to be different. Up to now, we have about 1 million people who have been affected by COVID-19, by being contracted COVID-19, out of 1.4 billion. And we have lost about 40,000 people have died. But if you compare with America, where it's 270-something thousand people have already, 276,000 people have already died. So you see how it is. And the population is about 350 million, which is very severe. So what happened in Africa, it's not equivalent to what happened in Europe. So in Tanzania itself, when we heard about COVID, Tanzania, there's no many flights going in. So because there's less flight going in, and they close up the borders, so there was a very few chances for the virus to be transported to Tanzania. And the other things in Africa or Tanzania, including Tanzania, 85% of the population, they live in rural areas. It's only 15% they live in the cities. And the transportation between the city and the rural areas, the movement is very low. It's not like where in Europe and Australia and America, most of us, we are urbanized. We live in the cities, where we are congregated in the cities. And the other things, which is different, in Africa, the median age is 19 years. While in Europe, including Australia and America, it's 40 years. So we have more old people in Europe, America, and Australia, and very young people in Africa, including Tanzania. And we see the disease was more killing old people. So that's why we saw a lot of people dying in this other day. And then there's issues of weather and everything. So in Tanzania, President Magufuli and everyone like the other president, they didn't know the velocity of this disease. That is one. So what they did, they said, okay, let's keep a distance, let's wash hands, listen to the doctors, but they didn't lock down because lockdown was going to kill more people than the virus itself. The way we see, the virus didn't hit so much, but because we are hand to mouth, if you lock people and you don't have a system to distribute food and essentials, how people are going to survive? So Magufuli, Dr. John Paul Magufuli, the president of the United Republic of Tanzania, took a different approach, but he was aware. And he said, we don't have vaccine. The only thing, let's find out how to live with this virus in harmony. And that's what they are saying, wash hands, keep a distance, wear a mask. And you look at people in Tanzania, they did. Initially, we had a few number of people died of COVID-19. We have those deaths, we stand there. And eventually we came to ask, when we are counting the numbers, we are done, are we competing with who? Let's deal with the people and support the people to be able to avoid contracting the disease. I don't say that there's no COVID. It's not sporadic the way we see it in America. And also it's limited in areas, but also the people, they took their own initiative to wear a mask, to keep a distance, wash hands. So that helped. We don't see graveyards like the one we see in Brazil or the one we see in Italy the army trucks carrying up the dead bodies to the burial. We didn't see that. We didn't see what's happening in America in this massive grave being there. No, we saw some people lost life, but it's not that big number. And not only Tanzania, equally the whole of Africa. They didn't see what we saw. They didn't come across what we saw in Europe and in America. It's very unfortunately in Swaziland, Eswatini, we lost the prime minister last week. He died. He's still young. He is 52. He died from COVID-19, but there was other underlying issues. So he passed away. But most, and also Tanzania, we lost some two members of parliament, and also we lost up 3 members of parliament, including 1 minister. We used to be minister for foreign affairs, so he died. So initially there was that, but it didn't happen like what we are seeing now in America. So I'll say Magufuli, he didn't want to scare people, but in a very different approach, he was saying to people, listen what the doctor is saying. He didn't act like Trump to trash things out or whatever. But for him, we have to say, listen the doctor, what they're saying, but knowing that people's daily feeding, it depends from hand to mouth. You stop them with no any other mechanism to supply food, essentials, and everything, more people will starve. And as a leader, he didn't want to do that. But the COVID is present, but the people, they are aware, and they are taking precaution.
That was Dr. Joseph Masika. We could not get into as many issues because all the issues that he's going to address are thorny issues in African communities. So we are going to have Dr. Joseph Masika again for the other issues that he was supposed to address, the issues of the elections in Uganda, the issues of what's happening around the African continent. And we'll come back to issues like the formation of the Federation of African Communities Council of Australia. All those issues have not been covered tonight. We'll come back with Dr. Joseph Masika. And Dr. Joseph, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We look forward to having more chats with you to inspire the African community.
Thanks so much, Jaison. And I do say to everyone who was listening out there, please continue supporting the radio, because I continue supporting the African community. It needs you, and it needs your participation, your voice, and to work with the leaders to make sure that our voice is being heard from all levels of the government. I wish you Merry Christmas, safe Christmas, and also safe festival season. I look forward to catch up with you next time. Goodbye and a good weekend.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph.
Thanks a lot.